Good morning. My name is Matt Wayman and I'm a Senior Technical Advisor in the Pavements team at National Highways. Thank you for inviting me to speak at your conference. I last spoke here in 2010 on a not unrelated topic, which was the asphalt pavement embodied carbon tool, so this is a welcome return for me. Today I'll be talking about National Highways' net zero ambitions and our perspective from the Pavements team. As I progress through my presentation, you'll see that aspect and what it was set up to do is perhaps now more relevant than ever. Today I'll talk about the Net Zero Highways 2030, 40, 50 plan, which is our overall plan for carbon at National Highways. I'll particularly focus on the net zero target for 2040 for construction and maintenance and the key actions thereof. I'll then go on to talk about some company initiatives that will affect pavements and also the specific pavements team initiatives that we're taking forward in the Safety Engineering and Standards Directorate. The Net Zero Highways Plan was launched to support DfT's Decarbonising Transport Plan in July 2021. It's a clear programme of time-bound targets with lots of objectives, some of which I'll go into more detail later on in the presentation. It clearly aligns with the 1.5 degree reduction goal of the Paris Agreement and also refers to some of our other environmental priorities such as air quality, noise, biodiversity and climate change adaptation, which should also be progressed alongside the carbon reduction goals. I'm sure you'll appreciate that it's only been a few months for actions to filter down to us who look after specific assets, of which pavements are one of 9 asset classes. The plan is wide-ranging in scope and covers activities that we conduct ourselves and can otherwise influence. By 2030, the target is to reduce our own direct emissions to zero. This covers activities such as the energy that we use in offices and on the network, and traffic officer vehicles. There is also scope to use some of the softer state to absorb carbon. By 2040, the target extends to the materials that we use on the network and how these are constructed. This is the main area of focus for pavements. The 2050 target is primarily about facilitating road use to become net zero. Whilst the majority of this will be achieved by decarbonising energy use in vehicles, we realise that we have a role to play in providing the infrastructure to facilitate this and the road space for HGV trials. In terms of the scopes of emissions according to the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, the plan covers all of scopes 1 to 3 and more. We aren't making a standing start in terms of carbon reductions. Some initiatives have already been progressed in RIS 1 and early in RIS 2. A few examples are presented here where we have provisioned for electric vehicles and facilitated modal shift. In specific projects, we've used hybrid plant and warm mix asphalt. Warm mix is now specified routinely and is being encouraged as our default option. There has been a carbon neutral scheme on the A590 that reduced emissions by recycling and use of solar energy to power the plant on site. It did, however, offset around 60% of residual emissions, and the aim in future is to reduce much more before offsetting, in accordance with the true net zero ethos. Here are some of the detailed actions against each of the time-bound targets. I've just highlighted a few that I'll refer to in subsequent slides. These are to develop a net zero or near net zero roadmap for asphalt by 2022, a 0 to 10% reduction in construction and maintenance emissions by 2025, and to require certified carbon management systems from suppliers by 2025. These systems are likely to be aligned to PAS 2080. There are a couple of key points on this slide. The first is that the DFT plan for decarbonising transport didn't cover infrastructure provision. This has instead been baselined in our own plan, as illustrated by a red bar. The anticipated reductions against each activity are illustrated by the blue bars. Net zero asphalt is something that we have to directly address in the pavements team. A further point to note is Public Procurement Note 0621. This is being implemented by our procurement colleagues in maintenance framework provision. It requires any procurement over 5 million to consider the supplier's carbon reduction plans. The likelihood is that these will need to follow a standard method by 2025. So what are we in the pavements team focusing on? There are three main initiatives. The first concerns reporting specific carbon footprints, and this is a collaborative project that we're undertaking with the MPA and Eurobitume. We're looking at the method to report actuals in terms of carbon footprint and potentially future-proofing for other impacts. The starting point here is aspect, and potentially will move towards EPDs, making use of concurrent SEN initiatives in this area. In the course of this, we're trying to address the methodological issues such as surface life. The second initiative is building the roadmap for asphalt towards net zero in 2040. The target date for this is June 22. We anticipate lots of supply chain engagement to be necessary for this activity and will be stakeholders on other roadmaps such as cement and steel. The third initiative, which we continue to do, is facilitating network trials and the switch to warm mix asphalts. We're also trialling things like longer life bitumen and more durable and higher recycled content surface courses. We should first have a look at how carbon data is currently collated. Carbon returns from area teams and major projects have been collected for a number of years using the carbon emissions calculator tool. These have partly been used to create the baselines in the carbon plan. We now need to switch to suppliers reporting actuals in terms of carbon footprint. This will reflect where carbon reduction plans come to fruition and where innovation for carbon reduction and materials can be demonstrated. We also need to beware the unintended consequences of solely focusing on carbon reduction, and this is where EPDs that evaluate a large range of impacts can provide a more holistic viewpoint. Here is an example extract from the calculator tool. You can see that the data is not very granular for asphalt, with an indicative number for warm mix only having just been added. There is, however, provision for custom carbon footprints to be provided, as indicated by the underlined text. A method to do this is what we're working towards. In the meantime, we're using Aspect for this purpose. And here is an example of where we are requesting specific carbon footprints to be reported in relation to warm mix asphalts. Warm mix is now permitted via clause 908 for use on the SRN, and they've been publicised as a preferential option to hot mix asphalts with a few exceptions. This is the first pavement spec that requires reporting of actual carbon footprints. These should enable us to obtain a better default value and also to demonstrate the first significant progress towards the 0 to 10% savings by 2025 that we need to demonstrate. Another main initiative that has come onto our radar is preparation of a roadmap towards net zero asphalt for 2040. This will ask what can feasibly be done and when, and we need to take a fundamental look across the asphalt life cycle from quarry or refinery to deconstruction. We need to obtain significant input from the supply chain, and they've already come forward with lots of good ideas already. concerning some of the technologies in the table below, from anything from long life binders to cold recycling, additives, plant tech, higher recycled content, etc. In the course of this exercise, we'll need to determine the carbon reduction potentials of each of these, and these should be assessed in the context of an asset management strategy in whole life terms. They'll each need to be assigned a technological readiness level, and we can point some towards the decarbonisation fund to accelerate progress where the technological readiness is less than others. That brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. I've added a few links to key documents that I've mentioned that you might find useful here.